Hello, and welcome to All the Grief, a regular podcast for all those who have been touched by grief. We are your hosts. I am Rebecca Luttrell.
And I am Andrea Rebecca. We are two friends, a therapist, and a social scientist, both highly sensitive fellow grievers, here to share our hearts as we talk about all the grief.
Good morning, Andrea.
Good morning, Rebecca.
How is your heart this morning?
Oh, my heart is pretty full, and yeah, it feels like brimming. Last night, I go to these mediumship circles, and last night I brought my sister to one, and it was kind of a big step because while we both definitely believe in like a sort of metaphysical world, we don't talk about it with each other much. And so it was the first time to sort of like fully bring her into this world. And I was like, all right, you're about to see what happens. And it was so wonderful. She had like such an incredible experience. She's like a super magical human too. So it just kind of amplified her gifts in a way that I don't know that she had ever been able to just be like, oh, you turn them on, you turn them off. And so it was just, we got like messages from our own family members, and it was just really beautiful. And then I dreamt with my great-great-grandmother last night, and it was just really beautiful. So yeah, my heart just feels really brimming, and there's some hope in there that I've been needing. So yeah.
That's really sweet.
Thank you. How is your heart this morning?
Yeah, my heart, it's giddy, and you know why. I've kind of known for a while. It feels like now they're able to announce it, but my friend who has recorded for the past year, their documentary was accepted to Sundance. And so I feel so excited, and I'm trying to figure out how to get myself there. But probably by the time this airs, Sundance will have already happened. I'm just, I feel really excited. And I know it's been such a process. They thought they were going to do this story with their friends and about the process of a terminal diagnosis and all these things, but it's turned into a love story. So it's really just about Andrea and Meg. And I'm like so excited to see it. And I hear it's just a tearjerker. So yeah.
I can only imagine. And so much love to both Andrea and Meg. And I just like want to honor like you and Andrea have this really unique love story that I get to see and is so special.
You have your own private documentary.
I do. I get to watch and hear about this other like really beautiful love story that Andrea has in their life. And so I just want to honor that too.
Thank you.
It's one of my favorite love stories.
Oh, thank you. That's really sweet.
Yeah.
Well,
my heart is, I also echo that giddiness. So I feel like our interview today has been literally a long time in coming, but I'm so excited. So this morning we're going to be talking with Elizabeth, who we will call Liz, because we're sort of on the inside now, O'Donnell, who is joining us because in 2020, she was sent home from the hospital empty-handed after she delivered her daughter, Aaliyah. She was 30 years old at the time and a dedicated school teacher, and she decided to take her pain public. She posted a picture of herself holding her baby girl in the hospital bed, and she posted it to Instagram. It went viral. She was absolutely disgusted and disillusioned with how stillborn families are treated. She quit teaching and immediately began advocating for parents who have experienced stillbirth. She was super inspired by the outpouring of support and motivated to keep her daughter's spirit alive. And so her organization, Aaliyah in Action, was born. We'll hear so much about it today. She continues to sort of make waves in the world and change the lives for parents who experience stillbirth. So she is working in stillbirth prevention as well as the Director of Education for PUSH for Empowered Pregnancy, which is a parent-led advocacy group seeking to cut the U.S. stillbirth rate through awareness and empower expectant families with essential information. We are so excited to welcome her to the podcast, Liz.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here. And it definitely has been a long time coming, but we are here. And it just means that today was meant to be.
That's right. Absolutely. Beautiful. I love that. So Liz, how is your heart this morning?
My heart is, we're feeling pretty good. You know, as a lifelong griever, it can ebb and flow each day, but I was actually at the hospital this morning where I delivered Aaliyah, which is always an interesting feeling, but fulfilling in a way. And my mom is actually on a train on the way down to DC now to visit for the weekend. So I'm looking forward to that.
Oh, beautiful. Yeah. It's nice to sort of have like those tender moments that just bring things up, but know you have something like your mama to look forward to.
Exactly.
Well, welcome. So we touched a little bit on why you're here today, but what we've been sort of like exploring with folks as they join us is what is that grief origin story? And in that, it's sort of like, what was that first moment when grief kind of flipped your world upside down, when you became that lifelong griever?
Definitely after hearing the words, we can't find a heartbeat. I won't say that grief was the immediate thought in that moment.
Sure.
But I know that obviously that was the origin. I think confusion was the first thought that I had.
Yeah.
I had a textbook pregnancy with Aaliyah. Everything was great. We were just at about 32 weeks and I had felt reduced fetal movement. And at the encouragement of my doula, took myself to the hospital. I actually didn't tell anyone that I was going to the hospital because I thought I was just being an annoying first-time mom.
Sure.
And hearing those words and not really being able to think that far ahead in those moments. I knew that I had one job that I needed to do. And then my plan was to just go home and figure out how to put myself together again. I certainly knew that grief would be at the forefront of everything that would be happening in my life, but I had no idea of everything else that would follow after. So it has been an interesting journey is one of my keywords, saying interesting. Some days are really rocky, but then some days are filled with gratitude and are fulfilling in a way because of how I've chosen to honor Aaliyah.
Yeah. Thank you for opening your heart and being able to share your story. Rebecca has shared on the podcast, her sister also lost a baby boy, and Rebecca was there. And so I know that your story will touch on tragedy and a pretty major grief spot for Rebecca. Tell us about that time for you.
I think, as I said initially, my one focus was, okay, I have to deliver my daughter. I rarely cried in the hospital or showed any emotion. I was just in shock, right? I realize it now. And I had been working with an amazing therapist. I realized I was just in shock for probably about a week. And so it wasn't until just being in the quiet of my home that I would say grief really hit hard. You spend so much time preparing for baby. The house had everything that you need for a baby to come home from the hospital. We had just had our baby shower, so the entire upstairs was lined with diapers from the diaper raffle.
Yeah.
And, just having a completely done Winnie the Pooh nursery. Just coming home to that. Initially, I really just stuck to my couch because going upstairs was just trigger after trigger. But I wanted to take some time it can sound a little interesting if you haven't experienced this, but I slowly just started to go upstairs and spend time in the nursery, spend time around all these things that friends and family had gotten us with the most beautiful intentions. And just kind of sit with that and say, oh my gosh, she was so loved before she got here. And then because grief can be funny, at the same time also think, oh my gosh, is anybody going to remember her now that she's not here? And those are just really tough, conflicting feelings. But I, about 11 years ago now, had lost a best friend. And so I had kind of known how grief worked. Of course, when it's your own child, it is a little bit different. But I was kind of preparing myself for all the different road bumps and potholes that would be coming along. And I have just, even to this day, we're over 4 years now, I try to honor each bump and pothole as they come because I love my daughter. And if she was here, I know that she would just be so loved. And, I really like how you opened up when you were talking about the medium circle. I'm definitely a believer in whatever other side there is. And so for my grief, I try to honor it in a way that acts as though Aaliyah is still here and she's just here in a different form.
And so, like Andrea mentioned, I have also I was like, this interview is going to wreck me, but we're doing it. Yeah. But it's interesting because it is my sister's grief and it's her predominant grief in her life. And I think as her sister and the older sister and the one who wanted to like protect her from everything in life, it was really just such a hard experience that still can break me open to think back to that time. And we're close to 18 or 19 years at this point. So I feel like such an important part of the story is what the hospital was like, who was around you. Did you feel supported? And I would love to hear a little bit about that day.
So I found out on November 28th. I
Mm.
had decorated my whole house for Christmas and then realized, oh my gosh, I haven't felt her. Aaliyah's father and I, we don't live together. So that's why I didn't tell anyone that I was going to the
Yeah.
hospital. He's a first responder and I just didn't want to wake him up
Yeah.
because he had work the next day. So I thought, oh, I'll just let him know when I'm back home, whatever. So I went alone. It's also during COVID. This was November 2020.
Oh, right. Yeah.
So, some restrictions had been lifted, but not fully. And my mom is based in Jersey. So I go to the hospital, I hear this, and I was like, oh my gosh, her dad doesn't know. Someone has to call him. And of course, he's asleep because he wakes up at 4 a.m. for work. So that was very stressful trying to get a hold of him. And I was told that I could have him with me and one other person. And I chose my doula because I knew that we were not going to know what to do. This is a first baby for both of us.
Yeah.
Neither of us had ever experienced anything like this. And I didn't know what was going to be expected of me. So I chose my doula. My mom, my best friend, and her mom all came down immediately to DC from Jersey. And my original birth plan was to be, very holistic, unmedicated, just really going by my body. And I realize now this probably was not the best choice, but in the moment I thought it was. I really wanted to try to stick with that the best that I could. So they did say that I could go home. I was a little at that point because I was in such shock. And again, I had driven myself there, but they said you can leave and then come back. And I thought about it, but then I didn't know if all of a sudden I would have like a mental break on my way home. And that made me really nervous, not only for me, but for other people. I'm driving a vehicle, So I said, I think it's best if I stay here because I don't know what my reaction will be in 10 minutes from now.
My gosh, totally.
Aaliyah's father got there and my doula. And I said to her, I want as minimal intervention as possible. I'm like grasping straws, right? I just wanted some form of control because I had lost it all instantly. So that was on November 28th. And then by November 30th, my doula had spoken to me and she said, we can keep doing whatever you want. My body was not really cooperating. And she said, it's getting really tough for Aaliyah's dad to watch you going through this. And I mean, the man never left my side. I love him more than anything. And so, I said, you're right. And I was also I wanted to just go home. And so I said, I'll do the epidural. And of course, within like 2 hours, I delivered her. But looking back on it, I go back and forth with, was that the best decision? Some days I'm like, it was, because one, I spent more time with her, and two, I got to do it my way for a little bit. But then on the flip side of it, it was traumatic being in the hospital for that long. And they had to do they had to turn her, and I didn't want medication when they did that. Like I was just being really stubborn, and, her father was in the room having to see me go through that pain, knowing it's just a lot, right?
Yeah.
Most days I feel like that was the best choice for me in that moment. And so, my mom and his sister, they were outside in the waiting room, and we tried everything to let my mom come in to see Aaliyah, but they would not allow her because of the COVID restrictions, which is really tough. But after I delivered her, I ended up needing surgery, and I delivered her like right at the shift change. And so we were able to spend some time with her before the surgeons for the new shift came for me, which was nice.
Yeah.
Initially, we had said that we didn't want to spend time. I didn't know what was the right thing to do.
Of course.
I had no idea. And again, this is why I'm so thankful that my doula was there, because I talked to so many families in my work now that were asked one time, do you want to spend time with your baby? And because it is like a horrifying thing to think about, right?
Yeah.
And they say no because we don't know any better, and they're only asked that one time. So I am so thankful that I had my doula there to encourage us to do pictures, to hold and spend time. I'm just so thankful for that. And we did that. And then I had surgery, and then we just went home. And that leaving the hospital and just going home, walking out into a world that everything. We're right next to the metro station. Everybody is going back and forth, just living their life. And here we are just walking out like, oh, I guess we'll just drive home now.
Yeah.
Very little resources. And hospitals they do the best that they can. I believe most hospitals do the best that they can. But a lot of what has driven me to the work that I do, I saw a lot of gaps in care that should have been addressed in the moment. However, I believe part of the reason I can do things like this is because I was treated with such love and respect in that hospital. I'm still very close to the nurse that told me that she couldn't find a heartbeat. I'm still very close to the midwives that I was with, and I know that that's not what a lot of people say after they experience this with their providers. And that really upsets me because I don't think I would be in the position I am in today if I hadn't received that care. So I am just so grateful for that.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing your story. And yeah, I'm just going to cry a lot in this episode. And I'm okay with tears.
Yeah, it's okay.
They're good. They're healthy. But
this is a place for crying.
It is. As you were talking about the holding her, that was a big piece of that day for us. My sister had preeclampsia and she went into the hospital and she was at 32 weeks as well. And she went into the hospital and I was going to be at his birth. So I was with her that night and then they said, go home and get rest. That morning we got a call and my mom was staying with me and I could just hear the sounds my mom was making didn't sound human. And I was like, oh, what's happening? And she's like, the baby died. And she said, she wants us to come. They have him in the room. Do we want to come see him? And I said, yes, without thinking. And she was like, oh, I don't know if I can handle it. And I said, if she can handle it, we can handle it. And we got in the car and went. But when I walked into that room, that's just, just something that was so intense and I'm so grateful that she got to hold him, that I got to hold him, that we had those moments with him. He was warm and there was like a weight. And so there's this whole way that you're like, I'm just holding a sleeping baby, but I know you don't get to leave with him. That was really devastating. But what was so fascinating was mostly the men in our lives were like, we need to get to our house and put away all the things and clear out the nursery. And I was like, don't touch it. Don't touch it. It's like, I understand the drive to say, let's take away anything that would create pain. And it's like, you can't. You literally could clean this house up and you're going to add to her pain probably, and, it's still a pain that she carries. And of course, and when we have just the opportunity to drop in and she's just like, it's still really alive for me. And I didn't she didn't expect that. And I don't think the hospital handled it well. So I think that it's like on the other side of what you're describing of, I don't think that they knew what to do. I think the nurse on staff, she ended up getting fired. I think she made a lot of bad calls because she was in a hospital and they could have done an emergency C-section, but she kept saying, we don't hear his heartbeat, but drink some orange juice. But I think that no matter what, my sister's like, I'm not going to just sit here and blame and tie my life up with that. I have lost my child. There's no bringing him back. So yeah, it brings me to, I'm sharing this piece of the story, but it brings me to this idea of giving back because that was such a huge part of my sister's journey. And I know I read a little bit about your, making things for mothers that are at the hospital. She did that. She would create these little care packages and drop them off. And yeah, how that can be just, you walk into a world of understanding what can happen and understanding what that feels like in a way that can inform what you choose to do. So yeah, when did you start to feel like I'm ready to do something? Because first you have to be in your grief.
Yes. Well, first, can I ask your nephew's name so we can honor
Ethan?
Ethan
Wolf. Yeah.
Love that. Yeah. So, I resonate with a lot that you just said, and definitely my work with Push addresses things like just drink juice, because that has happened so many times for families. And so I want to validate that for anyone listening. Everything for me happened very quickly with jumping into all things advocacy, forming a nonprofit. I was a first grade teacher. I've always been a teacher. And now I realize I am still a teacher, just in a little bit of a different way. And I never envisioned myself outside of a classroom. I've never wanted to be a coach or a principal, none of that, just a classroom teacher. And so, one thing that I knew after this loss, I just kept saying to myself in those first few weeks, at least I know I can still teach, because that is just who I am. I'm always going to be good at that no matter what else happens in my life. That brings me peace. That brings me solace. And, everything just kind of came crashing down when my employer revoked my paid family leave that was already approved. And that's, a long story in and of itself. But, that's when I posted the picture, because things that were being said to me made it sound like I didn't actually deliver a 4-pound child.
Right.
And I just wanted to show people, wait a minute, I did do this. But I say all that to say the response that I received after posting a picture of me holding Aaliyah, I would say hundreds of local people, thousands of nation and worldwide people reaching out to me that had experienced the same thing. I mean, it was a very needed distraction, because after experiencing this, you feel like you're the only one and that nobody can understand this. I mean, when I was in the hospital, I was searching Instagram, like hashtag stillbirth, hashtag pregnancy loss, because I hadn't known anyone that went through something like this. And it turns out that thousands, tens of thousands of mothers and families are. And my initial thought was, I have got to do something. That is just my nature as a teacher, to always help and try to find solutions for things when something isn't right. And so I just kind of shifted my teacher brain to this space. Initially, I didn't know what that would look like. Certainly, the issue of paid family leave was everywhere. And just hearing so many families had also had this leave revoked, it just broke my heart, because I am very blessed that I'm in a position where I didn't have to go to work if I didn't want to.
Yeah.
Not every family is like that. And so to just think of someone experiencing this and then having to go to work the next week, I couldn't fathom it. And so my advocacy in this journey of doing something and really using my grief. And I guess maybe in those early days, it was more so anger as opposed to, my angry side of grief, as opposed to my, I don't know how to phrase it, the loving side of grief. But it was really the anger that spurred me to try to come up with a plan. And my first plan had to do with paid family leave, to make sure that while it was too late for me, that no family after me would have to go through that experience. And then my next step was, I did have a positive hospital experience despite the circumstances. I did see some things that could have been better. Again, I can just call up a therapist, or I can just talk to a friend, and some people don't have those options. And so what can I do to just create more opportunity for people to start healing in a healthy way? Because we know that there are so many unhealthy ways that people can choose to try to heal. And for me, a lot of that was tangible items. And so that's, that was kind of my first thought when I started Aaliyah in Action. What can people take home with them? Obviously, it will never replace not taking home your child.
Right.
But the memory boxes sometimes can, especially in those initial days, can do more harm than good. It made me sick to think about opening up Aaliyah's memory box. Now I cherish it and I look at it pretty much every night before I go to bed. But initially it was just so scary. It was so scary to think, oh my gosh, like there's pieces of her hair in that box. It's her handprints and her footprints in that box. I can't look at that and expect to still, do something productive today.
Right.
And so the idea for Aaliyah in Action was, what can I provide mothers for when they are sitting on the couch and they're in their grief, up in bed, just, to be honest, a complete mess? What can they pull from to just make them feel something? And I literally mean just feel, when you just feel so numb. And so some of the items that we have are, a face mask or lip balm, just little things that you can feel when you are feeling quite low.
Yeah.
And to me, that's a huge mental health help and aid.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
That is definitely not considered often. And I want it to be considered more. And that has just totally, got me on a snowball of doing all of this other stuff. And it happened all very quickly after. And I'm happy that it did. I needed that. I know that that's not the best route for everybody, but it was for me. I never could have imagined any of this happening.
Right.
But that's where we're at.
Yeah.
that piece around, like, for you, immediate action was part of your healing process. And it reminds me, we interviewed the two women who host a podcast called Good Morning. And pretty quickly after their mother's deaths, and for one of them, like within months, they started the podcast and they sort of had the same message. Like, for us, this was part of our grieving process. This is what we needed to move through and with our grief, but that it isn't the same, and that not everybody needs to feel productive or that you need to give back, but it was yours.
Right.
And for some of us, it is this call that for some of us, it just ties into a purpose that feels really close to home, and that doesn't have to be the same for anybody. But it really sounds like this was sort of Aaliyah moving through you of like, all right, I can't be here in your arms all the time, but this is how I get to be in the world through you, which is just a really beautiful legacy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and that, now that I reflect on it a lot, obviously Aaliyah in action, right? That was a catalyst for the name. But I also did not, people always ask me, oh my gosh, where did that name come from? And I really was not brainstorming names for this organization or anything. It just popped into my brain. And because I am someone that believes in signs and everything, I didn't even question it. I just said, okay, Aaliyah in action. You told me, I got it. That's what it is. Put it on the paperwork and we're done. And that to me was just kind of one of the biggest signs of her that I felt first was just that name, Aaliyah in action. And I just didn't even think twice. And I felt empowered, in those moments, especially when I thought of the name or when the name came to me, like, okay, I'm doing the right thing. Because I was a little bit worried. I have a pretty extensive background in education and mental health too. So I knew what I would need, and I, quickly put things, together for myself, things that I should be doing. And so one of my biggest concerns about what I was doing was, okay, is this actually, it feels good right now, but is this actually unhealthy to be kind of rushing into making an organization and doing all of this? And I was kind of questioning that because I didn't want to all of a sudden crash and burn, or, wear myself out. But as soon as I got that name, Aaliyah in action in my head, I thought, okay, you know what? I think I'm on the right track. I think I'm doing this, in a healthy way. So it definitely, it's all her spirit in action, keeping me focused.
Yeah. Well, and what I hear in so much of your story, even in the beginning of just sharing the thought process of the day that you knew and all of these things, I'm like, oh, I hear someone who is like really good at taking care of yourself. Like you're constantly having the conversation of,
yes,
okay, I'm going to do this. Is that like the right thing? And so that you could, at this point, I would think also trust yourself if you were like, it actually was too much. I'm going to pull back, that you could do that, which feels really important when you take on something so big.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's so beautiful.
The other part that I'm curious about, you talked about Aaliyah's father being right by your side and so many things, right? Like he loves both of these girls, he loves you and is watching you in pain and loves Aaliyah. So how was the grieving process afterwards for the two of you to sort of move through that together or separately? I don't know.
Yeah. So, we have a very unconventional relationship, but it works for us.
Beautiful.
And, I think the plan was after she was here, we would be moving in together, blah, blah, blah. Obviously, that had to change, right? Or wasn't going to look the same as we anticipated and were hoping for. I think that for us, it has been really great that we can grieve together. And then we can also grieve apart because we don't live together. And I feel like that has been the healthiest thing because we can talk to each other about how we feel. His background as a first responder, it is really hard because he's already kind of wired to not be so emotional about things.
Yeah.
And of course, it's absolutely different when it's your own family that you're looking at going through this.
Right.
But there have been some challenges with that for that very reason. I mean, he went back to work. He's at the hospital where I delivered Aaliyah all the time, right? And it took me a while to actually think about that. And it wasn't until one night and he said, oh yeah, like I'm here. And I finally thought to ask, oh my gosh, how do you handle that? Like, are you okay? And it's just, I feel like men and women grieve very differently. People just grieve differently. For us, I think it has been a blessing in disguise that our situation and relationship is the way that it is, because I have seen so many people lose relationships with their partner after a loss like this. And while we are by no means perfect, I am very, very grateful that our relationship has been able to, handle this in a way that works for both of us, where we still love and respect each other and have fun together and can, have a rough day together. Because I know that can be really hard for people. And I'm a very independent person, and so is he, which is why we're both stubborn and can butt heads easily. So we also know when to step back, and then we'll just, do our own thing. And it's what works for us.
Yeah.
And I'm grateful for that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you named something it's just like a truth that needs to be acknowledged, that it is really hard to do grief alongside someone, because we all grieve so differently, and it can be hard on relationships because you feel like you're not doing it right, I'm doing it right, and the other person is having the opposite experience. And it's really hard because it's who's holding the space of we get to grieve differently, and that they're both valid, that that's a really hard, you need like a third party. So it sounds like that there was some inherent health in the system, that you were like, we're going to step away from each other right now, and that you actually had the space to do that.
And it works. And he's, I think after everything with the photo and everything that's happened, I mean, he's the most private person I've ever met in my life. And I was pretty much up until everything has happened. But to him, all of this stuff, like knowing that, I'm recording a podcast right now talking about Aaliyah, to him, that is just so like, what, how, and so he is my biggest supporter in the background.
Yeah.
So the other piece of that, so you two figured out a way to sort of create this grief dance where you were together sometimes and other times apart, to be able to sort of like honor your grief in your own way and honor it as a couple and Aaliyah's parents. And then we sort of heard this response by your workplace, which was like this erasure of what happened.
Yes.
Which you said prompted this picture. How did other folks within your system, your social system, your support system respond to this, both the sort of like good and that could have been better, so that those of us who may find ourselves in the support side of this maybe learn from your experience of what felt really validating and what felt they were trying to erase this moment for you?
I mean, my friends and family have been above and beyond. I could not ask for a more amazing group of people. Everybody was very supportive. It was really tough because her dad did not agree with me posting that picture. And I took him out of it because he is not on social media and he is in the picture, but I took him out. I think now the sentiment is different, but initially it was not good. So that was really the only person that was, thought it's nobody's business and we'll handle it, your employer, on our own, blah, blah, blah. Everybody else, friends, family, I mean, that's how this traveled and reached so many people. People were resharing it. People were sending it to local news stations to say, you need to find out what's happened to this woman who has been working for the school system for so long. And now this is what's happening. And that is what caused the snowball. And, I think a lot of times friends and family can be there for those first few months, and then people start to drop off.
Yeah.
Not with any ill intent or anything, but it's natural, right? The further you are, time heals all wounds type of thought process. I'm very lucky that my friends and family have not done that. There have been a few, and definitely some friendships and some relationships with family members have absolutely changed and or are non-existent after Aaliyah. But for the most part, my friends are so active in the work that I do, and they want to be a part of that, and they don't forget Aaliyah's birthday, or they don't forget, right after Memorial Day when I found out I was pregnant in 2020. So I'm, and again, I think that's another reason why why I have the energy to do this, is because if I'm having a bad day, I have a friend to talk to. If I make plans with friends and then all of a sudden one of those days creeps up and I'm not leaving the bed, I can say, gotta cancel, and nothing is held against me.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, definitely the advocacy that my friends have also taken on in this space post Aaliyah has meant the world to me and has been a great help in my continued healing from it all.
Yeah.
So I love that you had this system that stepped in and supported. And I think if we sort of look at all the things that allowed you then to sort of move into Aaliyah in action, it was because you had all those things. Like you said, like you had these systems in place that allowed you to feel enveloped. And I'm sure you still had times where you felt really alone and lonely, but without that being the main point. And so tell us about now how you do this for other parents, both sort of on the one-on-one level through Aaliyah in Action, but also at the systemic level.
Yeah. So it was really important to me, in figuring out, okay, what am I going to do next? I had to leave teaching because I was doing the school district. So I knew that was out of the question. I knew I would have to figure out something else to do. And I started private tutoring all of my former students. And then, I said, okay, I have to get this organization up off the ground. How do I do it? It was very important to me to be involved in the bereavement side of things just as much as the advocacy to prevent these types of instances if they are preventable. And I just kind of jumped in by talking to the hospital that I had delivered Aaliyah at, GW. I said, I have this idea. Let me know what you think. They told me this has never been done before. We think it's going to work. I said, great. Mm-hmm. And just like with the Instagram post, Aaliyah in Action has grown because people are sharing it with other people. And it's tough because I wish I didn't have to do this. I wish I didn't have to do this because Aaliyah was here. I wish I didn't have to do this because there's not that much loss and no one needs me. And right now in our country, that is just not the reality.
Yeah.
And so what keeps me going is that I know that this package, which to someone that hasn't experienced this, they might not understand the real value of it. Mm-hmm. But for people that have experienced it, you know what it's like on those really rough days. And there might not be someone to turn to know that I can provide that for another mother has been so helpful in giving me what I need to keep going and to keep trying to scale this up so that bereavement can be taken more seriously. For me, Aaliyah in Action is really just the beginning in my larger plan to really reshape bereavement response after any form of baby loss.
Yeah. Right.
We provide these packages for any form of baby loss, not just stillbirth. And I see a lot of things that we could do better in this country that other countries are doing, which has been helpful in me forming a plan. So all of that keeps me going for Aaliyah in Action. And then to know that I'm equally involved with helping, I get a lot of emails from mothers whose leave has been revoked. And so I try to share, hey, this is what I did. Maybe this is what you can do. I've worked with moms in Minnesota, New York, California, another state I'm forgetting. But, to know that I try to give just advice. Hey, this is what I did. I don't know if it'll work, but you can do this. You can stand up for yourself in this moment because you're not only standing up for yourself, you're standing up for your baby. And, that'll get the mama bear activated in a lot of people, despite the heaviness of it all.
Yeah.
And then everything that I do with Push for Empowered Pregnancy and trying to prevent these things from happening is very similar to what I'm envisioning for kind of overhauling the bereavement response, is making sure that our prenatal care standards are where they need to be to drastically reduce the rate of preventable stillbirth. And I do that in honor of Aaliyah. All signs point to perhaps this could have been prevented.
Okay.
Some people don't have answers for that.
Sure.
We were able to send placental slides to find out additional information. And I know many mothers whose stillbirths were absolutely without question preventable. And that to me is just the fact that we deal with that United States disgusts me and activates me in the name of Aaliyah to make sure that families don't have to go through this.
Yeah. And so with your work with Push for Empowered Pregnancy, what I experienced that was so fascinating to me with my sister's experience, which was very specific, and it was preventable. But in the preeclampsia, I forget the name of the drug. It will come to me. Cervidil. One of the potential side effects is abruption, which did happen. But the nurse on staff was incredibly arrogant and thought like, no, I got this. We don't need to call anybody in. And she should have called a doctor in at some point. And then what I found was the part of me that wanted to protect any other mother from experiencing what my sister had gone through. And I would hear someone and they'd say, yeah, we're going to go ahead and do Cervidil tomorrow. And I was like, oh, there are things you need to know. And they're like, I don't want to hear it because I don't want fear in my system. This is where the intriguing question is for me is like, how do you have people entertain something could happen? And it's so important for you to have an empowerment stance. I mean, I remember being pregnant. I was like, don't listen to all the horror stories. You're just going to be in fear the whole time. And so I'm like, okay. And I have a horror story like in my nervous system I already have been through, So yeah. So what's been your experience with?
Yeah. So, I mean, we as Push get asked that a lot.
Yeah.
And I am just as straightforward and blunt as can be. It is much more horrifying to hold your dead child. And I don't want that for anybody.
Beautiful.
And so if I can just share the things that I wish I knew, I don't want to scare anyone. I don't want to, it all comes down to scaring, right? I don't want to scare anyone. That's not what we do. We want to empower and inform and let you know that it is okay if you have a question to call up your doctor or to just show up until someone answers that question. And we want you to know that, I waited for hours to really focus on not feeling her because I thought, oh my gosh, I'm just being annoying. I went online and what did I read? Drink juice, have a piece of candy, jump up and down.
Right.
Those should not be first things that we are saying to a pregnant person who is sharing that they have been feeling reduced fetal movement. And so with Push, we are just coming from a point of view that is, hey, these are some things that maybe may have kept me and my baby a little bit safer. We don't share super scary stories.
Yeah.
It's nothing like that. It's all evidence-based facts. We have an amazing Instagram account where, it's just all fact-based that we just want you to know. Something that I had learned about with my work in Push is ICP. I can never say it, intracholestasis of pregnancy, I think. But it's when you have really itchy hands and feet and it can lead to stillbirth. And that condition is often overlooked and ignored by the people experiencing it just because they don't know that it could be something, and sometimes by providers. And so if we can just share information on, hey, if you have this symptom, definitely take yourself, don't wait, then we're doing our job. And we have had people reach out to Push and say, hey, I had seen this one post and I took myself to the doctor and this is what happened, thanking us. And, I'm somebody that even with my work with Aaliyah in Action, everything I do is upbeat. I know that this is a heavy subject because I live it every day. And I know that people that haven't experienced it can kind of shy away from things that feel heavy or could make you feel sad or awkward sometimes, right? And so with both Aaliyah in Action and Push, when I talk about these organizations and the work I do and how, yes, it is in honor of my child who has passed away, but I try to do it with hope and with empowerment as opposed to leading with the sadness and the heaviness that comes with it. Those are always going to be there. You have to put in a little extra work to turn it around and make it not seem so sad and just, straight up depressing, but that helps reach more people. And at least with Push, because our audience is expecting families, no prior loss needed. We want to just reach everybody because myself included, I was low risk. I was perfect. My last appointment, they made virtual because I was so fine. And so I always think, wow, if that appointment the day before Thanksgiving wasn't virtual and they had heard her heartbeat, would they have noticed something?
Right.
I'll never know that. if someone is telling you, oh, just do virtual instead, say, no, I would still like to come in for an appointment. I would like to hear my baby's heartbeat. Just kind of those empowering things can go a long way and could end up saving a life.
I love that. We spoke to Jessica Fine, and she was talking about, she wrote this beautiful memoir about her daughter. And she was talking about, like, we feel this pressure not to be the annoying patient, to not trust our own intuition. You know, we're not the medic, we're not the doctor or the nurse or the whatever. And we don't want to seem like the frantic first time pregnancy or third time, whatever it is. Like, we don't want to seem that way. And I don't know, it was just such a good reminder. She gave us this great reminder of, like, that's their job. Like, their job is to be there for us. And it also made me think, like, and if you're the person who's thinking, I don't want to be the annoying one, you're not. You're definitely not. Because the patient who is the annoying one is not having any qualms about calling all the time for everything, So, like, go ahead, show up, give the phone call, ask the question. If that answer doesn't feel sufficient, like, go ahead and get more information or ask. I hear you. And I would really feel better if I heard my baby's heartbeat before, whatever it is. Like, ask for what you need for your heart and soul so that you advocate for yourself and we don't feel like we're making ourselves feel like we're too much.
Yes. Such a big piece of that is informed by how we are treated by the medical profession. And I remember because of my sister's experience, it did inform a lot about how my pregnancy went and all the things that I was, like, not willing to listen to them downplay. Like, I had a sonogram, like a little handheld one. My sister sent it. She had it for her second pregnancy and she sent it to me. And I was like, I need to hear her heartbeat. And the nurse on staff was like, well, I have no idea how to use this. This isn't working. And I was like, let me show you how to use it. But I was like, in her mind, everything that I said was outrageous. I was just like, I'll be outrageous. Like, I'm fine with that. Because she didn't know my backstory. And we did end up in a situation where my daughter's heart rate was actually decreasing. And, and they were like, let's do Pitocin first. And they were like ready to start doing all these interventions. And I said, I want a C-section. And they're like, no, we do not immediately go into C-section. And I said, it just broke into tears. But I was like, my nephew was stillborn because they did not do an emergency C-section. And I'm not willing to wait. So it was like, I had to fight for it. But I like knowing what my sister went through and knowing what was worth fighting for, where I think it would have been a really different story if I hadn't had that experience. I think exactly what you're saying. And as a first-time mom, things happened and they're like, oh, first-time parents. And it was so condescending. And I'm like, this is what we are all ultimately fighting against, is a system that there's a reason we have this story in our heads. Don't be a bother. Don't be silly or overreacting. And now I'm just like, overreact. Who cares what anyone thinks of you? But it's hard to get there. Yeah.
Well, and it just is so frustrating that you were able to advocate yourself because of what happened to your sister and your nephew. That should not be the
case. You shouldn't have to.
We should all just be informed because, and this is the teacher in me, we should all be informed because we're being educated correctly.
Right.
But right now, it is taking those experiences, and now with us, a group of mothers who have experienced this, putting this information out. I hope that over the years, we can see more of a change and that these things are just being taught to the medical providers right away, so that someone doesn't feel like they have to use their family member or what they saw on Instagram stories from other people. So it's frustrating. I would like to hope in the next 20 years we could see change in that and in bereavement standards, but who knows?
I believe that we can see change because absolutely tragic story, but you did have a good experience. Like your medical team. I had a very traumatic birth experience as well. And my medical team I did gift cards, gift baskets. Like, I was like, you are forever like my angels. Like, I will never forget their names. They are the people that allowed me to live and bring my voice into the world. And I feel so grateful because I know that isn't everyone's story. And I talk to other mothers and it's like, this could have gone so tragically wrong. And it so often does, both on the side of like preventable stillbirth, and our maternal death rate in this country is absolutely horrifying. And I think about people I know close to me where it's like the three of us should be dead. And in any other city, in any other hospital, that would have been a higher probability. And it shouldn't be luck of the draw that I lived 4 blocks from the hospital that takes a very different stance around maternity care.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right.
I love this conversation. I love what you're putting into the world because as a therapist as well, there's so many things I'm like, we need to tell our first responders X, Y, and Z about trauma and like letting people shake. It actually helps healing. But all we can keep doing is like, we just keep showing up and expanding your reach. So I know we're getting at time, but I'm thinking, what is something that you've seen happen as a result of the work that you're doing that you feel like was a moment or maybe multiple ones where you're just like, yes, like something changed?
I think there's 2 big ones. Definitely seeing the paid family leave law in Washington, D.C. be amended to include stillbirth. At first, it didn't look like that was going to happen. And then it finally did, which was just, for me, it just affirmed that, okay, I did the right thing. It ruffled feathers. It caused a lot of mental anguish for me. In some ways still it does, but at least I know and have since met mothers that have unfortunately experienced stillbirths in this city that were able to take the leave that they deserve to heal their bodies. So to me, that is a win.
Yes.
Looking at Aaliyah in action, it's been really great to grow and everything, but it's been really hard to fund because hospitals don't have bereavement budgets, right? Right before Aaliyah's birthday, December 1st, I had gotten a notification that Aaliyah in Action was chosen for a $75,000 grant that we did not apply for. It was a donor advised fund that Dr. Alfie of the Maddie Fund, Mattie, and her team had our eye on us for a few months and chose us as an organization working towards equitable mental health, especially for women of color. So we know that pregnancy loss does affect women of color more than white women. And so that to me, it was like, oh my gosh, I read the email. I'll tell the story real quick. I read the email at a gas station. I was just checking my email while getting gas, and I saw it, and I just thought, there's no way this is real. So I immediately called my mom. I'm like, there's no way this is real. She's like, I don't know. It could be real. I call Aaliyah's dad. He's like, this is real. I said, there's no way it's real. Like, this is crazy. I haven't applied. The competitiveness of grants is just insane.
Right.
Yeah.
And so to receive that email so close to her 4th birthday was, oh my gosh, it just, again, it affirmed that, okay, I'm doing the right thing. It can be really hard to get grants or to get hospitals to cover their packages. And it's been really rough this past year because people are finding out about us everywhere and requesting packages. But this woman and her team saw us and they saw our work in action and decided that we were worthy of this grant. And I'm still on cloud 9 from it.
You should be.
Before now, been coming up with ideas and bringing on board members to do more in-person things, more retreat-like things for Aaliyah in Action. And now I can finally do it. And so that's why I think I said in the beginning, I want this to be more than just the package. The package is certainly the main component, but yeah, just knowing that someone saw us and I had no idea the whole time, but believes in us has been, I think, our greatest accomplishment as an organization and something that I'm so excited to walk into 2025 with.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Thank
Yes.
you. I mean, I still can't believe it, but it really
I
happened.
know.
And that's also what's so hard after experiencing something like a stillbirth.
Yeah.
You just won't believe anything is real until you have it and you can hold it. And when I held that check, I thought, oh my gosh, something good happened and I can allow myself to be happy and celebrate it now instead of, waiting to see if it's really going to happen or not,
That
which
makes
is a
sense.
very real thing for people that have experienced this trauma. So
That makes so much sense. Oh, well, congratulations. That is
thank you.
And so deserved.
so well deserved.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Who knows how she even found her way to you and her eyes on you. I mean, it feels
I still have so many questions. Yeah. I mean, I'm just so grateful and just excited that we can help more families.
Yeah.
Yes, yes. Well, we will have eyes on you in 2025 and just see the manifestation of your heart and Aaliyah and all of your work in the world.
Yeah. And I will just say, for anyone that's listening, if you have experienced pregnancy loss or someone close to you has, please don't hesitate to reach out, because we ship our packages nationwide at no cost to families. So,
Wow.
grief has no timeline. And, when anniversaries
Right.
roll around, it might be nice to just be able to pull from something that you know is for you and to honor your baby. So no one hesitate to reach out if you need support.
Oh, beautiful. Thanks, Liz.
Well, thank you. And thank you for all of the work that you do. And I
Thank
hope
you.
I worked in nonprofits for all of my career pretty much. And so I also know that when you get a big grant like that, it usually leads to opening more doors.
Yes.
So that is my hope for you and Aaliyah in
Thank
action.
you. I know it's scary and exciting. And I always say to people, if Aaliyah was here, she would be costing me a lot of money, keeping me up at night, keeping me busy. I would, just be running around like a crazy person. And I am doing all of those very same things
Yes.
with this nonprofit that has her name on it. And so it is a different form of parenting, but it is still parenting.
And it's so honoring.
You are still mothering something into the world that is very much in Aaliyah's spirit. So that's so beautiful.
Yes. Well, we will check out, as we always do, by just checking in how we've been touching into our grief this week. I'll start with you, Andrea. How have you been touching into your grief this week?
That's, like, for so many people, this is like griefy season for me. So it starts with Thanksgiving, which was my dad's favorite holiday. And last Thanksgiving I ditched. I just took my little family and we went up to the mountains, because in the weeks prior, I lost 3 family members and I just couldn't look at a table like that. I just didn't have the capacity. So this was the first one. And it's the bittersweetness of grief. Like, we had family members we hadn't seen in a long time who were there, which was so sweet. But it was like, oh, this family's incomplete because one brother's here and the other brother passed away suddenly. And my grandma's not here and my dad's not here. And, and so there's just so much. And then it's followed immediately by my dad's birthday. And then we're heading into Christmas. And so it's just such a griefy season for me. And having my sister here has been really helpful. I don't know if I could have gotten through these weeks without her, and her moving to Colorado cannot happen fast enough. And it's still not happening till September. Every time she says September, I'm like, why aren't you saying March? Why are we talking about September? But I know it's coming and I just need her closer. So that's been helpful, but it's a lot. I'm ready to wake up and it be 2025.
Yeah, it's a lot. I love your heart.
Thank you.
Thank you. What about you, Liz? How have you been touching into your grief this week?
I agree. The griefy season, because we just hit 4 years for Aaliyah. And I definitely, between Thanksgiving and December 2nd, I reemerge. And so this is really, for me, has been like the first week and a half, just kind of getting back into the swing of things after such a grief hangover, as we like to call it, has been fulfilling and also extremely exhausting. So I've just been trying to listen to my body and take breaks. Of course, with Christmas coming up, it's, why am I not out at Target filling up carts, with things from Santa? And so I just try to listen to what my body / my grief is telling me, and take breaks and support people as soon as they ask if I get an email. And for me, that honors the grief and helps me work through it. And then my quiet moments are where I can spend that griefy time with Aaliyah.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, well, happy belated birthday, Aaliyah.
Thank you.
Rebecca, how have you been touching into your grief?
I mean, I feel like I had probably said last week that when we were running our group and we were just talking about how totally griefy season, and the way that the season even feels congruent with grief here in the Northern Hemisphere, with, the darkening of the days, coldness, and there's so much that feels congruent with grief and loss. And this week in particular, I've really been, in prepping for this interview, just thinking a lot about Ethan and my sister, and just this way that lives in me, and was sort of the bookend of a lot of grief that came back to back in a short period of time. Yeah, I've just been feeling him Like, I just feel him closer, and it's just, it's letting the tears fall and kind of not trying to find an okayness and just being like, these are the tears that need to fall right now, because there are pieces that feel like almost like they were suspended in time that live in me. And I can be back in that moment. And I'm like, there's nothing to fix. I know where the story went 18 years later. I know he has 2 living children, and there's a lot of love and joy and happiness in our family. And I don't need to like not feel it because of all of
Yeah.
that. So it's still a very tender spot in my heart. And I've been in this week.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you both. Thank you, Liz, for the work that you're doing, for the way that you're allowing Aaliyah to live in this really beautiful way, and for coming on and having this conversation with us. It is such a gift, and we can't, like Rebecca said, we've got our eyes on you. We can't wait to see what 2025 brings for you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. And this conversation was just so great. I appreciate it.
You're so welcome.
Thank you.
Well, bye, everyone. Love y'all.
Bye. Thank you for listening to this episode of All the Grief. You can find us on Instagram at allthegriefpod. And please take a moment to rate our podcast and share us with your friends. We'd love to keep expanding our reach to all the people who could benefit from conversations on grief. Take care.